As it were, in media days, I will just begin with a poem by Gieve, and this poem is called Continue, and it belongs to his collection of poems, which is titled How Do You Withstand Body, dated 1976. Continue. Do you ascribe to me coarse feelings and obsessiveness, the way I grossly return to nerve endings? I am continuing with a century's skin. I am horribly bruised each time it is struck. But why isolate, you say, mere anatomy in the poet's abundant chamber? Why endlessly squint at ragged fibers? A chorale daily rises from the world's forsaken cellars, where tormentor coaxes a song from an object, a song of ravaged pitch, the century's folk song. And would you have me ignore it? Gieve Patel is a man of many parts. He's poet, playwright, painter. His first collection of poems was brought out in 1966. His first exhibition took place at the Adajania in Bombay, also in 1966. He wrote his first play in the late 60s.
Princess.
Yeah, he wrote his first play, Princess, in the late 60s, and was performed in 1970. So as you can see, these three different mediums of exploration were initiated around the same time, from mid-60s to early 70s. And also, he has been a medical practitioner for the better part of his life. He has also been an art critic, and I must say that I have learned a lot from his essays. I always dip into the archive to study what you have written, especially on Gieve Patel. And one of your essays for contemporary Indian painting from Daedalus is my favorite.
Thank you, Nancy. This is very kind.
And I also actually teach it at the Art Criticism and Theory course that Gieve Patel runs at Gyan. I think it's, as I was telling Sudhi the other day, for me, I'm almost obsessive about rescuing lost histories. Because although we are we consider ourselves to be a 5,000-year-old culture, we forget even what happened in the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Apart from being an art critic and a medical practitioner, Gieve Patel has through the years concentrated on poetry, playwriting, and painting. I would like to now return to the poem Continue, and I'm sure you're curious, why have I chosen a poem like Continue from the 1970s to initiate a conversation about an exhibition which is taking place in 2011. The reason, of course, is quite clear, because the genealogy of these various images go back to the concerns in your playwriting, in your poetry, as well as in your painting. And Continue, especially if I may repeat some of the lines from the poem, where you talk about, I am continuing with the century's skin, I'm horribly bruised each time it is struck. And now to jump to the last stanza, a chorale daily rises from the world's forsaken cellars, where tormentor coaxes a song from an object, a song of ravaged pitch. When Gieve was writing his collection of poems, How Do You Withstand Body, there were various events happening on the world historical stage. In the 1960s, you had Algeria, you had Vietnam, you had the students uprising in Paris. Before that, you also had the student uprising in Mexico City. In the late 60s, early 70s, you had the Nakshal uprising in India. In the mid-70s, you had the emergency. In the late 70s, you also had Pol Pot's extremely corrupt and horrendous regime coming to light through the images of pyramids of human skulls. The reason to sort of bring to light this whole chronology is to talk about what is it that ties the three different mediums of exploration in Gieve Patel's works. His preoccupations with violence, death, and pain. And in Continuum, for instance, which talks about the world's forsaken cellars, which could be the gas chambers, the death camps, there's also an allegory of creativity. The poet persona is a witness to all these world historical events, but the poet persona has the courage to also have some of that blood splatter onto his sleeve. The poet persona does not look away. He is ready to stare into the face of history. He's ready to implicate himself. And now, perhaps before I make more observations, I would like to ask you, how has your vision changed from the 1960s and 70s to now?
Thank you, Nancy, for for a very generous introduction. I think I take the question head on. You've quite correctly given a historical background. I think that historical background is very important because I grew up in that period. I was around the age of between 20 to 30, 35 when all these horrible things were happening all over the world. And I think that one is most open to the pain of the world around that age. Around 20, 30 is when you can feel other people's pain most strongly. And see, I think that the change that happens as we grow older is that you begin to realize that everything that happened in the 1970s is going to happen forever. It's not unique. There has not been a decade in the history of the world which has not been blood splattered. And so, for how long are you going to wail about it? And I think that it becomes the beginning of a search. You begin to grope around for different ways of thinking about and coping with this carnage, this permanent carnage. You can't be 20 and 30 all your life. You then be a regressive personality. I think that I can say that the change that you want me to articulate is just that I grew over there and felt the need to look at the pain and the bloodshed in the world, and just not bloodshed, but even psychological pain, even the pain of relationships within a family, which is as blood splattered as anything that happens on the battlefield. I felt the need to look at these things and to try and cope with them in a different way.
I'll take you back a little to the 80s, when you made paintings like The Crushed Head, The Drowned Woman, The One-Eyed Woman. And then gradually towards the 90s is when you had your when you began with your Well series. But even when you were doing your Well series with the sun and the clouds and the moon reflected in its waters, a very metaphysical, kind of introspective work, you also had the battered man in the landscape, the man from whose skull vegetation was growing out. So there's always a dialectic of the physical and the metaphysical in your work. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, maybe it was there right from the beginning, I could hardly ever do a horizontal line on a canvas without feeling that it is a horizon. And the moment you articulate the word horizon, it's no longer a horizontal line. It becomes something else. wise. So maybe this is a way of thinking of, a temperamental quality in my work, that nothing ever for me remains merely physical. It immediately acquires other resonances. And my effort often is to control these. So, sometimes I might want a statement that is more physical, in which case I would have to suppress the excessive resonances. Or I might want the resonances to go ahead. So, I think most artists do work like that. I think that most of us have a menu, a kind of a certain range of ways of thinking, and our art will use these, very freely. And I think that the real artist control. He will allow just so much and not more. Or he will, at that moment when he wants excess, he will allow it all to flood in.
In fact, thinking right now of your work on diet,
yes,
where you have the boy doing this in the fire.
Yes.
And I'd like you to talk about the background and how the work came about. But for me, that work, although of course it is talking about a certain political event, it is painted in blue and gold, almost the colors of Busan sky. So again, it's something that I have noticed very often. What happens is that if I'm working on literally quite a gruesome theme, let's say, I'm aware all the time that I'm using this glorious thing which is called color. Fat is exquisite yellow. Blood is crimson, orange, red. I mean, these are beautiful things, And there's no reason why I should deny the painting that moment of beauty, even if the subject that I'm tackling is obviously not beautiful in a conventional sense. The tormentor coaxing the song from an object.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a nice line for you to have picked up. The tormentor coaxing a song from an object. Yeah, it's a horrible line.
Yes, it's about how an artist creates things of terrible beauty, as Eliot would have said, from these various panoramas of violence. We were talking about how the line is never a straight line, it could become a horizon. Let me return to our exhibition here. You have the wells, which of course play with the idea of sense of wholeness, play with the idea. And of course, while you have the orange blossom well, you also have the well right there, which has a certain kind of terrifying cosmic eye, which looks back at you. On the one hand, it embraces you. On the other hand, it recoils you. You have the wells, and then we move on to the cloud series. The cloud series, again, it's very strange. I don't know how you're going to react to this. It may look like a seismograph, it may look like a star chart, it may look like clouds, depending on how you read it, bird flight, etc. But it also has the sense of body hair in it. For me, it's extremely visceral, and that's why it is not Nasreen Mohammedy's drawings for me. It's not Edward Martin making a work with precision instruments of detached geometry. It is very, very visceral.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. That's a wonderful insight. First time it's come to me, and I really can't quarrel with it. That's all I can say, really. It's a fine insight. Thank you.
Would you like to take us to the beginning of the cloud series, how it happened, the whole process?
I've always looked at clouds. But I also happen to have a very beautiful large window at my studio. And there's a big expanse of sky. And in Bombay, between the months of June and September, that expanse of sky becomes a theatre. There's a constant drift of clouds, and they are forever changing. They are forever different. Each moment to moment, they just kind of, and I just gave at them, and so one thing it struck me that something that's engaged me so much, maybe I should try and put it down on paper. And I started, but I was rather timid about it because I had a feeling of confidence about what I was about to do. So what happened was that each time I had an exhibition, usually once in about 2 or 3 years, there would be 2 cloud drawings. And I would find that nobody was remarking on them. Nobody was particularly interested in them. And so, the next exhibition that I can put in 2 more. And again, and I said, there's got to be something wrong with these drawings, not a reaction at all. And then suddenly, 4 years later, my very good friend Abdul comes up to me and he says, Gieve, when I was in Madrid, I was thinking that one of these days, somebody's going to ask me to curate a show. And what would I curate? So I said, what? He said, I will curate a show of your clouds. But, he said, there can't be 1 or 2 clouds. There will be 100. So I laughed and I think I was talking. I was still practicing at the time, I remember. So I laughed and I said, well, at the rate at which I work, because I work very, very slowly, this is never going to happen. And I felt nice and free, and that was the end of the conversation. Then that evening when I went to the clinic, I couldn't forget what Abdul had said. So towards the end, when there were, most of my patients had finished with me, I picked up the phone and I called Abdul and I said, I'll give you 50 clouds. Which is what I have to do. And so that is how the whole thing started. It's very interesting. Creative things happen when you get the right kind of support. And this was the kind of support that I needed to do these works.
It's a permission.
A permission, yes. Yeah. And a certain feeling that it was worth doing. Yeah. But once I got into it, once I started, it's been one of the most satisfying things that I've done in my career. It's given me tremendous enjoyment and pleasure.
What was the process? Did you make it in one sitting?
No, I had it actually lined. I had about 6 or 7 works going at the same time. And every day, each day that I worked, that is, I would take them out and take them out one by one and add a few lines, put it away. Few lines, put it away. And 3 days later, I pick it up again. Many of these drawings were completed in 7 or 8 sittings of that kind. But an occasional one was ready with the first drawing. And then I would look at it again and again and I would say, should I add something? Should I add something? And the drawing would say, no.
Even on the one hand, one would think that the human figure is absent from this body of work. But on the other hand, I think that the human figure is very much present, as I said, body hair.
A very hirsute human figure.
Yes, a very hirsute human figure. So there's some kind of viscerality, but also there's some kind of violence which returns in the cloud series. There are explosions, there are lines coming together, there's scratching of the line.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about the sense of violence, an undercurrent of violence and frisson which happens?
think that clouds are things that have been worked on again and again in our artistry, and there have been such a variety of ways in which artists have handled clouds. It's almost a kind of dangerously cliched subject to handle, and so I had to kind of refine my thinking about what is it that fascinates me about this subject matter. How am I looking at it, say, differently from the way Poussin had looked at it, or Cézanne had looked at it, or all our miniature painters would have looked at monsoon clouds. What's special about the way that I feel about them? And I think that I identified that what fascinated me about the cloud is the fact that it has no final form. That it is in fact forming and dissolving concurrently at the same time. And that if you give a finished cloud, you are totally false to your subject, because there's no such thing. And so this liberated me. Immediately, it became very obvious that I cannot handle the cloud as a mass, a watercolor mass, and it seemed to me that the linear approach would be best, because I could just do anything with the line, And the moment I said I could do anything with the line, that was a permission, kind of, to myself, to approach a state of anarchy. And so, many of these drawings are, in fact, a play with anarchy. They are not anarchic ultimately, because no work of art can be that. If it is that, then it's not a work of art anymore. It's a pose, it's a stance, whatever. Because this is one thing that art is farthest away from. But it can approach anarchy, It can, an artist can go that close to anarchy. And so, I think that is what, this allowed me to, do all the things that you talked about, the frisson and the bad line, so to speak,
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of doodling and graffiti.
Yeah. There are lines which are exquisite.
Yes.
But there are other lines which should be, technically or one could call them sort of happily bad lines.
Yeah, I suppose also giving yourself the permission to that, because on the one hand, as I said, you have the illusion of fullness in the wells.
Yes.
And you have an anarchic frame. Even your skulls, again the skull, as you said, it's a kind of generic subject in art.
Yes.
In the Manitas paintings, again, the skull immediately engenders sic transit gloria mundi, thus passes the glory of the world.
Yes.
When I look at your skulls, it's very interesting, because I would call them green skulls, although they are charcoal drawings, because I feel that they gently morph. You see a kind of gentle ghosting when you go close to the skulls. Yeah. It's like they're happily growing. Yeah. And to take something which is dead and to give it life.
That's a reverse process from, say, some of the paintings of the drowned woman,
exactly.
Or where you had something that had life and has been given death. Makes sense. I think again, you see, it's a dangerous subject in the sense that it's been handled by masters, So what can you say? What more can you say about it? I think I was helped by the medium, charcoal, which is something I'd never handled before. and I've always wanted to. And the moment I put charcoal onto this rough paper, it just started singing, and so this particular set of 7 skull joints, they have for me a mystery of their own, because I had one model skull which I put before me, and I would keep changing its position. And after the first and the second successful drawing, I somehow kind of focused on the figure 9. And I told myself, there's going to be 9 drawings. And as the third and the fourth continued to be to my satisfaction, I became greedy and I said, maybe could I even extend it to 12? As it happened, I did 7, and the moment I started working on the 8th, I knew this was the end. I mean, the thing literally collapsed under my hand, and I couldn't work anymore. So, one has to respect these things.
I'll again try and push back a little. You were speaking about why you can't make anarchic works.
Yes.
And perhaps I could extend this and ask you, what role did ideology play in your early work?
Okay. In the 60s, I read a lot of leftist literature. I was very drawn to it, including way out things like Edward Cleaver. There's a line in Soul on Ice where he says, no slave should die a natural death. And I remember feeling very moved by that line, and even attempted to write a poem around it. Today it seems to me a ghastly line, and I've said, please let every slave die a natural death. But in your 20s, a line like that can become kind of emblematic of a kind of resistance to oppression which will not stop at any point. Was that a wiser moment, or is today's moment wiser? I don't know. But certainly, I would say that I put that behind me. However, I would say that particular moment of interest in kind of extreme leftist literature never left me completely, and that I've always been, in that sense, left of center, and it has found expression in various kind of writings and paintings. So that's the ideological position that you're talking about.
One of your mentors is Adajania. You are a self-taught artist. So your genealogy does not come directly from the Gieve School of Art, but perhaps through your mentors, one could say that you perhaps were exposed to a certain kind of transcendentalist vision of art via Adajania, but of course through your own experiences, being a medical practitioner, working I believe in the 60s and 80s, the primary health centers, going into the rural areas, actually looking at poverty and death and pain. So on one hand you have Adajania and a kind of via Adajania, a certain JJ genealogy. You have your own experience of being a doctor, working in rural and urban areas. You also have other practitioners. You have the emergence of the politics of the local via the Baroda school. You also had perhaps certain exchanges with Vivan, Meena and Kasoli. I'm just trying to sort of map out this whole terrain to then ask you, how did you make the choices that you made? And did you ever feel pressurized to belong to a particular school? Or because you're an autodidact, you could take whatever you wanted and yet be free to do what you wished?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Very well put. I don't know if Akbar will be happy to be called the prophet of the JJ School of Art. I think that there were some people, some teachers of the JJ that he freely acknowledged, were helpful to him. But whether he stands for a JJ brand, I'm not sure about that. I don't think he does actually. I think that
there are many JJ brands actually. Pachika would be one.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's no single.
Yeah, and they're not all transcendental, are they? Anyway. But Akbar's transcendentalism, I think it's a very, very individual one. And it probably has been one of the most major influences in my work. Because very often, he's a great raconteur, the stories he tells, even when he talks about the book that he has read, it's irresistible, you have to read it. So, I even tried to read the Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit. Can you imagine? Didn't go beyond the first paragraph. But he introduced me to Ramakrishna. He introduced me to Paul Clay's theoretical writings. It was quite really good. So Akbar was very important to me. I think sometime around 16, around almost the same time, I met and became friends with Ghulam Ahmad Sheikh and Bhupen Thakkar. And their interest in local imagery immediately got hold of me. And I didn't know at that point that I was getting the hot water, because I was subjecting myself to a totally opposed influence to the one that I've been so happily working with till that moment. And I think that moment of transition, where kind of I started losing the local human figure, was very critical for me, because as long as I was working with, say, photographs from the press and using political figures from the press and using them in a certain kind of mock heroic way.
The dead politicians seem.
Yeah. I think Akbar was comfortable with that. But the moment I started using actual, people on the street, I think I got a lot of approval from Bhupen and Ghulam, but a lot of disapproval from Akbar. And it was really like changing camp, and it was difficult. But I must say something about the health of the whole scene, that I was able to balance both of these. They are all of them still my friends. And in a strange kind of way, from time to time I return to Akbar's world, and perhaps I've never left it. It's been a very faithful fickleness.
Did you also go to the Kasori art?
Yes, I went to the Kasori art camps twice. The second time I went, I had a big blow up with Geeta and Veran, who were very close to me. And again, in a certain kind of way, they still are. But I think that in terms of ways of thinking, we part company there. And I think that what most I think that what I couldn't really kind of quite ultimately had to rebel against was that I felt that I was being asked in that very leftist atmosphere, I was being asked to forsake my sense of the mystery of the universe. It was almost as though it was bad form to think along those lines. And I think that I could not stomach that.
And you had the courage to reject it, although that was the hegemonic position at that time?
It was difficult, but I did it, yes.
That's interesting. Since you talked about participating in metaphysical journeys, reading the Bhagavad Gita, Sanskrit aesthetics, etc., I would also like to perhaps know about another part of your life. There are so many parts. Your relationship with A.K. Ramanujan, for instance, and the Chicago School of Art, folklore, all the things that also feed into your work.
Okay. Chicago School of Art, no, I had no contact.
Chicago School, not School of Art.
You're talking about, yeah, okay. Ramanujan was a very close friend. I think that his poetry is just amazing, and I think that we still haven't fully acknowledged, the greatness of his poetry. I think that he's going to be discovered. I know that a lot of people think very highly of Ramanujan, but they need to think even more highly about him, and this will happen over the next 20, 50 years. With Ramanujan, I just got shared everything, including a wicked sense of humor. He was just a delightful person to be with. I must tell you a little lad. We were traveling to Chicago by bus, public transport, and there was an African American driver, and each time the bus would stop and a fresh load of passengers would come in, he would give them a big smile and he would say, "Welcome to the love bus." And this would happen at each stop, and a couple of times I exchanged glances with Ramanujan, and Ramanujan glanced back at me. Finally, when we got off, I said to Ramanujan, I'm sure you will do well, but it made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I couldn't quite believe it, What was he talking about? So Ramanujan burst out into laughter, and he said, "You see, you come from a much older and a more cynical civilization, that's all." And I think that Ramanujan and I just loved the oldness and the cynicism of the civilization we come from.
And what was the Chinese poetry that you responded to?
Oh, the cynicism and the ancientness. Like you read a Ramanujan poem, and there's in every second line, there is a double take, It makes a very human statement, and then it mocks itself, and then it reinstates itself, and it mocks itself again, It's just this, I think this is tremendous artistry to be able to do this, to constantly reassert an idea and constantly undermine it. And I think only a very old civilization can do this.
Well, it's difficult for me to follow up on that.
I wish I had a poem of it. I could have demonstrated it to you. In any 5 lines.
Yes, I completely agree with you, because Ramanujan is very important for me, not only for his poetry, but also for his research and writing on folklore.
Yes, tremendous.
And the fact that at that time, while I was studying in college in the late 80s, he provided a certain alternative to the hegemonic narratives, both national as well as religious narratives that the nation was projecting. So the fact that he spoke of the many Ramayanas, the many folkloristic Ramayanas which had very different understanding of the Ramayana, which could be told by a subaltern hero in a village in Andhra Pradesh or in Karnataka, that I think perhaps that and the fact that the subaltern studies people were talking about the fact that you could write history from below, from below. Those two things, in a way, were very influential for me.
Yeah.
And of course, his poetry, with a lot of satire and irony, was something that I completely enjoyed.
Yeah. But the important thing is that it was not just satire and irony. There was a kind of like a gem in the middle of it. There was also an idealism.
Yes, that's true.
And it's just the coexistence of these things that is wonderful.
I like what you're saying. I mean, the fact that you have an ideal, you sort of destroy it in the Nietzschean sense, like breaking down the ideals and remake it and then re-destroy it. So.
Yeah. And you're right, I mean, like in his prose writings and all, I think he's one of the most liberated minds that we have had in this century in India. I think that when he talks about something that's very Indian, it is the farthest possible statement from deadly nativism.
Difficult to now suddenly shift gears from Ramanujan, but I'll take you back to your own work. In the introduction, I spoke about how in the late 60s you began with your mid-60s and late 60s you began with your three journeys: poetry, painting, and playwriting. Why did you choose to express yourself through all these different mediums? What was the need that compelled you to do so?
I'm greedy. I think that whenever I like something very much, I mean, at one level it's quite simple. Whenever I like something very much, I want to see if I can do it. So, when I looked at paintings which I liked very much, I wonder, can I do it? Then, when I worked with Adajania in Bombay for a brief period of about 1.5 to 2 years in his theatre group, and I saw the wonderful productions and I read some of the plays that he introduced me to. I first wanted to become an actor. Can I do it? And when I found that I couldn't, I said, can I write plays? And I tried something like that.
Again, in your plays, I think that there's a certain shift to sociality because as against your paintings, for instance, because you're talking about the community, especially Mr. Mehra, for instance, the relationship between the Parsi figure and the Adivasi figure. You're constantly dealing with power hierarchies. Would you like to talk about what was it in your playwriting that you could do, which you could not do in your painting?
Yeah. I'm a great reader of fiction. I love reading novels, and I love reading plays, and poems, of course. I think that, again, can I do it? If Charles Dickens can portray a certain kind of English people so wonderfully, can I portray Parsi gentleman as wonderfully, or his wife, or his daughter, or what about the servants? Where do they come in? And then slowly that whole kind of world begins to take shape. Obviously something that you can't do in painting. I think in painting, when families are portrayed, you do, I mean, it's wonderful and it's a great kind of thing, but be as you can in a work of literature.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked, I was just saying devil's advocate, of course, but it's because I think other human beings, slavery, alternative sexuality perhaps, there are all these things which you can perhaps allude to in a painting, but you can't articulate them the way you do so in your plays. I was thinking, for instance, a poem like The Ambiguous Faith of Gieve Patel, being neither Muslim nor Hindu in India. Is that the title? Yeah. So, that's the poem where you talk about to be part of this hate, to not be part of this hate is deprivation. And on the other hand, you have this Adajania, which has to do with your locus in society, being a Parsi, and also revealing a certain history of Parsi feudalism, which is difficult to talk about. So, could you talk about this poem and that play?
The ambiguous fate of Gieve Patel not being Hindu or Muslim in India, and that being leaving me with a sense of deprivation. The poem says that I can't participate in this hate. I'm outside it. But it also is ultimately critical of that hate. I mean, this poem is often quoted, but it's one of those kind of poems that come to you like that. And they don't stand for, the poem doesn't stand for a permanent moment or feeling. Like it was right for the moment when it was written, and therefore maybe it can even be read today comfortably. But if I said at that moment that not to be part of the Muslim-Hindu hate is a deprivation, I won't stand by that today. I think it's a freedom today, I'll say that. Not to be part of that hate. And I'm grateful for it. However, as an observer of that hate, you are implicit in it.
Self-implication.
Yeah. In Mr. Beram, it's much kind of it's a much bigger canvas. It's talking about a Parsi landowner who's also a progressive lawyer, a reformist, everything good and nice and kind of thing that you can think about. And he even goes to the point of educating a young tribal boy who's been orphaned, and in the 19th century allowing him to marry his daughter. And then the thing begins to break down after that point. And all kinds of complications enter into the relationship. And it leads on inexorably to a point of complete destruction of values, of idealism, everything. This is a kind of a mega structure of aspiration and collapse.
But in a way it also sort of ricochets with dissolution and resolution in the child series. I mean, a long shot, but
yeah,
because there's always that moment in your work.
Right. Yeah. But maybe that is the cynicism that we're talking about.
Yes.
That I think that I don't know if it's a justifiable cynicism, but the sense that any belonging to any old civilization gives you, that nothing endures. However, even so, the attempt has to be made. Although you know that it will not endure.
That's why the green skulls. maybe I'll just shift gears again, and I wanted to ask you, you use flatness as a device in your work. Even when you have a well, it's a kind of shallow depth. It's not deep enough. Why?
There's one very simple and clear explanation for it, and then there may be others which we can explore later, which is that these wells are the wells that I've known from forever in South Gujarat, the village that my parents come from, which is called Nagpur. And they are modest wells, they're not the kind of magnificent step wells of North Gujarat. They get very good monsoon. So, sometime around the middle of the monsoon, you can look in and dip your hands in the water. It's not like those wells which can go deep in and make you feel vertiginous. So that's the physical fact that these are the wells I'm familiar with, and these are the wells that I love. Maybe temperamentally also, they allow me to talk about what I want to talk about. I'm not interested in vertigo, and I'm not interested in falling into a kind of endless metaphysical space. I'm interested in touching the water.
I don't know what to say. Well, I think that perhaps we've had quite a conversation between ourselves, and we should now open it up to the audience. But before that, I would like to make a little request to you, because it would be nice to know what you're working on recently. And you read a beautiful poem on your birthday at Sudhir's studio. And can I request you to read one of your recent poems?
Yeah, okay. By pre-arrangement. I'll read it. It's called Hermes, and I'll give a little background. It's the Orpheus Eurydice theme. I think most of us know about it. It's the Greek myth of this magnificent singer and poet Orpheus. When he played the lyre, even rocks would weep. And he loses his partner, his beautiful partner, Eurydice, and she descends to Hades. She's gone, and he wants her back. So he descends into Hades and meets the king of death, Pluto, and he sings before Pluto, and Pluto weeps iron tears and says, ask what you will. And he says he wants Eurydice back. And Pluto says on one condition, that she'll follow you, but you don't look back until you are in the upper world. If you look back, she's lost you. And Pluto appoints Hermes, the messenger of the gods, to conduct Eurydice back. And Eurydice and Hermes follow Orpheus on a narrow path back to the upper world. And of course, at the last moment, Orpheus moves back. Now, there are two very, very great poems written on this subject. And it's almost an impertinence for me to attempt the third one. But I'll tell you why I did attempt it. I was with a very good friend of mine, his name is Siddharth Menon, who's himself a poet and a teacher of English literature at Rishi Valley. He's now the principal as well. And at one of my visits to Rishi Valley School, he brought these two poems out. Now, I had read these poems on separate occasions to myself, but reading them together there, with another poet, it really did something to me. And I said, can I dare to enter this theme when Rilke has done it, when Milosz has done it? There are two magnificent poems on this theme. And then it struck me about neither Rilke nor Milosz have done anything for poor Hermes. They've talked about Pluto, they've talked about Orpheus, they've talked about Eurydice. But who is this man who's leading Eurydice back to life? And what is his role in it? Both the poets imply that Hermes is a bit saddened by what happens. But why is he saddened? And what has his role been in this whole tragic drama? And that gave me an entry point. And here's my point. Basically, the poem says that Hermes teaches Eurydice to be born again, and then has to be a witness to a second death. Look after her. A simple command with no ironic intent. To be told to look after that. Not a body, not skeleton, not mummy, not decomposing matter. An amalgam of all these, lying forgotten among boulders deep down in the earth. And now attempting to move by his side, if at all you might call that moving, which was a mute shuffle, pushing both her feet ahead of her at the same time, and stumbling and not falling. Be her guide, Pluto then said, more gently. The word weighed him down, sent him crashing from godliness to anxious times. He lifted her an inch, so like him, she should be free of the road's surface, till such time as she understood how to ground, how push the earth backward with each step. Oh, he will make a job of it. He whispered an instruction. It would not reach. He blew into her ear, clearing away rubble. A passage opened. She looked at him, shaken. Cobwebs obscured her vision. Her eyelids glued down, stitched with dried crusts. He spat into her eyes, whisked aside the dissolving grains. She opened her eyes and saw her guide. He did not look wise or gentle, but businesslike, wasting no time, since the man they followed had quickened his pace to a hurried, importunate trot. The mentor knew he needed to start at the start with all she had forgotten. Now, mouth funnel-like to suck at your mother's breast. Now, clear your throat. Push your tongue against lip, gums, palate, to form once again your first word. Cut teeth now. Lose them. Grow a second set. See how your tiny breasts begin to swell. Wipe away the blood that leaks down your thighs every 28 days. And so, to the truly difficult charge, what he being God, she was a good pupil, seemed even to understand why her slumbering body had been whipped to alertness. Eagerly leaned forward to to devour with her eyes that vision of the dearest man standing silhouetted at the earth cave's open mouth. And so, as he had to, the man looked over his shoulder. Hermes gave a cry, reached out with his hand to preserve that which he had fashioned. And yes, she wasn't there. A second death. Formation and dissolution.
Exactly. That's the reason I asked you to read this poem. There was a subliminal reason for that. Thank you very much, Gieve. I did not want to immediately speak because I did not want to disturb the thoughts of everybody here. If you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask.
Yeah, actually, going like that just stops you from saying anything more. But I want to go back to something that both of you discussed here. Thank you for sketching out several possible genealogies for Give's work. But I was just thinking that in visual arts circles, it's customary for many of us to associate Gieve and Sudhir with developments in Baroda at a certain point. And of course, the tremendous interest in the regional, the immediate, the local. But since Gieve and I share another history and another guru at different points, I was just wondering, Gieve, if discussions with Nissim, having known him so well, Nissim Ezekiel, did that have any effect at all on your sense of the regional, the local? Because that was very much Nissim's project, of course, to take seemingly transnational forms of literary production, but to ground them in a local and immediate.
Yeah. Thank you, Ranjit, for introducing this Ezekiel. He was very good friend, very important to my development. My first encounter with him was around the age of 18, when I showed him a bunch of poems and asked, and he was an accomplished poet at that time, and I liked his work very much, and I asked him his opinion, and he was fairly dismissive of the work, and but he said, show me the next thing that you're writing, over the next few months. And next time when I met him, about say 6 months to 10 months down the line, and I showed him the second bunch, and this time he sent me a postcard inviting me to tea. That was the beginning of a friendship which lasted till he died. And in the course of that friendship, there were many conversations. This word indigenism, which was so popular at one time, and no one uses it anymore. I think that Nissim was a champion of indigenism, and I think that rightly so. I think it was an important moment for the development of writers and painters. But he was not doggedly so. I mean, it was a very large mind, so that I think that he would kind of continue to point out, and to various people besides myself, like, why is it that we are not looking at things that are happening in our streets, things that are happening in our neighborhood, things that are happening in our country, etc. At the same time, he was not insensitive to the kind of work, for instance, that Akbar Padamsi would do, which had nothing to do with what was happening in our streets. But that was his focus, largely. And I'm sure that it influenced me greatly. And particularly then, when my association with Bhupen Katkar and Gulab Sheikh became richer, Nissan's ideas would feed into all of that. Certainly.
Also, Nissan published your first book of poems.
He did, yeah.
And I mean, just for the new generation today, another forgotten history is that Nissan was an art critic as well.
And a very fine one. I think that I'm sure somewhere in the archive one could look up. I think he wrote for almost a year. He was an art critic for Times of India, and those columns were wonderful.
But did Nissan also, in a way, act as some kind of influence on you to initiate art criticism as well?
Oh, when he stopped writing, he said, "Why don't you start in the Times?"
Oh, really?
And I said, I don't know anything about it. And he said, no, you do. And he gave me a couple of books, and he said, some of them. So I looked at it, and I said, rather timidly, he said, okay, I'll give it a shot, I'll try. And so I took up doing the Times of India columns after him. And 3 months down the line, Nissan was chuckling. And he was saying, when I stopped writing, a lot of people were very relieved. And they said, at last, we are free of these fierce columns, And then, now they're saying they found something worse. I think at 26 and 27, one can say things that one will never say again. So, I think what did happen was I continued writing for a period of about 8 to 10 months, and wrote and spoke my mind, and lost many friends.
Occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard. But I was also starting to paint at that time, and I found that the writing of columns in this way, speaking my mind, was interfering with my friendships with other painters. And friendships with other painters, they're important for any developing artist. So I had to sacrifice the columns.
Any other questions? Then should we call it a day? Thank you very much, Gieve, and thank you, Shalini, and the Give team for organizing this discussion for us.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Shalini, for a wonderful, giving me this chance. Thank you.